Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started.
My name is Layla Rodriguez. I recently turned 55, and I find myself standing on the edge of a pivotal moment in my life. William Rodriguez and I have been married for 31 years, after 2 years of dating. We have a daughter currently in college. This Friday will mark 31 years since our first date. Anniversaries have always been special to William. He's planned an evening for us at our favorite restaurant, but this time he'll be in for a shock, a surprise he likely doesn't see coming. My feelings for him haven't faded. I'm still deeply attached to him. He's a wonderful person. In the early years, our marriage was nearly perfect. Back then, I never doubted for a moment that we'd grow old together. Those early days were filled with shared goals, hard work, and mutual support. When our daughter Elizabeth was born, William suggested I leave my job to stay home until she started school. When I returned to my career, we focused on building a future, saving for Elizabeth's college and setting aside funds for retirement. Thanks to William's promotions, wise investments, and inheritances from both sides of the family, we've built a solid financial foundation. Throughout all these years, I've been entirely devoted to William. Of course, we occasionally had differing views, but we never truly fought. Our relationship remained stable, comfortable, and we always reconnected when both of us were willing. I never considered infidelity, even though I received attention from men at work and in our social circles. Cheating was simply not part of my nature. Now, though, I see just how contradictory I was. Publicly, I always condemned those who strayed, yet secretly found their stories thrilling. I'd heard of empty nest syndrome and how it could push women to unexpected paths, from trying to reinvent their lives to retreating inward. I used to consider this a stereotype. A quieter house seemed like an opportunity to grow closer to William. Elizabeth had been independent for a while and was often out until late, so her departure didn't seem like it would be a major change. But maybe it did affect me, and I just hadn't noticed. With more time to think, I began to wonder if I was still attractive to other men. Eventually, I allowed myself thoughts I'd repressed for many years. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror and noticed the changes. Wrinkles covered what was once smooth skin, my features had softened, and I'd gained a few extra pounds around the waist. I started noticing subtle compliments and flirtation from men. Either I hadn't paid attention before, or their interest had waned over time. To counter this, I started working out, wearing a bit more makeup, and choosing clothes that accentuated my figure. The attention increased, and although it felt good, it wasn't enough. I craved something more, something thrilling, vivid, and alive. I started reading about infidelity and watching movies on the topic. Thinking about my marriage, I realized it had remained unchanged since Elizabeth left. That was the issue. It felt like living in a loop, where the same scenes repeated over and over. Yes, William still complimented me, never forgot anniversaries, and our intimate life was steady, but it felt stagnant, like replaying old episodes instead of discovering new stories. I yearned for something novel, an unfamiliar spark. I gently hinted that we should try something new together, hoping William would be interested in exploring. He made efforts, but the excitement I dreamed of wasn't there. Although his actions varied, he remained the same William. And then the idea struck me, to find someone else, someone who could rekindle that feeling of excitement, perhaps a secret lover. For this new venture, secrecy would be essential. The weight of being exposed was crushing me. One wrong move, and everything I held dear, my husband, my daughter, the life I had so meticulously built, could crumble in an instant. Cover stories like working late or business trips were out of the question. Everything had to happen strictly within the office during work hours. Even under such constraints, finding someone who met all the requirements was not easy. I mentally sifted through possible candidates, dismissing almost every man for one reason or another. Yes, there were several attractive single men around, but they were notorious for bragging about their exploits, especially when it involved married women. I couldn't afford to become part of their stories. Meanwhile, my life at home was sinking into a painfully dull and predictable routine. Each day felt like a slow, suffocating loop, leaving me craving any kind of spark that might break this monotonous stagnation. My attempts to rekindle our marriage, like spicing up our intimate moments, had little effect. And then Michael appeared. He joined our office about a year ago as a mid-level manager, and amusingly, his name became a subject of mild jokes. The guys called him Devil or Curse with a smirk. Michael quickly attracted the attention of all the women in the office, who watched him unabashedly. It seemed he enjoyed light flirtations, but always maintained a certain distance, never crossing the line. But I noticed his glances lingered on me a little longer. His smile held just a bit longer when he looked my way. My heart would beat faster. Occasionally, he'd come over to chat, asking subtle, harmless questions about my husband and daughter. His questions never crossed any boundaries, but each one stoked a fire I hadn't felt in years. The first significant change came when he suggested having lunch together. I sensed that this could go beyond simple conversation, so I agreed. Laughing, he teased, "Let's hope the office gossip doesn't decide we're a couple." I laughed in return, saying, "A bit of buzz in my life wouldn't hurt." I hadn't intended for my discontent to be so obvious, but it slipped out before I could hold back. Our conversations remained light and brief. I learned he had a wife named Alice, a woman from a wealthy family with no children. He spoke of her with respect, but without warmth. She had married him against her family's objections, and often reminded him of it, expecting constant gratitude from him in their arguments. In response, I shared stories about my daughter with pride. When I spoke of my husband, I painted a picture of stability and comfort, nothing more. Gradually, I began hinting at the lack of passion in our marriage, though I didn't say outright what I truly wanted. Michael picked up on the hint, and it was only a matter of time before we both understood we wanted more than just friendly chats. I felt that pull, fully aware of where it might lead. We were cautious. No lingering glances, no obvious hints. To everyone else, we were simply two happily married colleagues. I even played along with my colleague Ted, calling him my office husband, and cheerfully reminding him to keep up our playful banter. It helped divert attention. Then came the day Michael and I ended up alone in the elevator. He reached over and pressed the emergency stop button, and I instantly knew why. He pulled me to him and kissed me with such force and passion that I responded with equal intensity. We were lost in each other, our hands roaming, completely captivated by the moment. When he released the button and the elevator resumed its descent, he looked at me and said, "We need to talk." I nodded, spending the rest of the day replaying that encounter in my mind. A fleeting sense of guilt passed through my thoughts, but the overwhelming desire quickly drowned it out. I wanted more. Michael called to deliver a simple message. He would notify my husband that I'd be coming home later than usual. Beneath this message, I wondered if he intended to test the boundaries of our relationship tonight, something I secretly hoped for. But when he arrived at my office, he simply mentioned that we'd need to wrap things up quickly, as it was unusual for us to stay late. He didn't even attempt to close the distance between us. Instead, we had an open and honest conversation, admitting our mutual desire to be closer, yet agreeing to approach everything cautiously. After that, we parted ways, each lost in thoughts about how to safely explore what we both wanted. I'd read about women who cheated, but consoled themselves with the idea that their marriage was still strong because they maintained intimate relations with their husbands. Yet they failed to realize that in doing so, they created an emotional distance outside the bedroom. Almost subconsciously, I began to see William differently. I started noticing minor flaws in him, as if I needed a reason to justify my interest in someone else. From that moment on, Michael often crossed my mind, even in the elevator, and the little things William did, things I used to ignore, started to annoy me. My tone became sharper when expressing my dissatisfaction. What I used to calmly ask William to do, knowing he'd eventually get to it, now irritated me if he didn't act immediately. I felt myself growing increasingly irritable. Meanwhile, Michael proposed a plan for our meetings. He rented a private, unused room a floor above. When I asked how he could afford it, he smiled and said, "Having a wealthy wife helps." I didn't argue. We furnished the room minimally, but made sure there was a large, easy-to-clean sofa. Soon we were using it, and the intimacy with Michael was even more thrilling than I had anticipated. In the heat of the moment, we whispered, "I love you" to each other, though we probably meant, "I want to be with you." From that point on, we carefully planned our visits, leaving the room one by one of us using the stairs, the other the elevator, to avoid suspicion. Our meetings had no fixed schedule. To maintain confidentiality, we met sporadically, sometimes skipping days to minimize the risk of being caught. We were extremely cautious, constantly scanning for signs of surveillance both at work and at home. We completely avoided digital communication. Instead, Michael bought special phones exclusively for our conversations, claiming they were for work only, in case anyone asked. On these phones, we used secure passwords and carefully thought through each move. As my bond with Michael deepened, so did my desire to be with him, though a part of me was still attached to William. William had become familiar and comfortable, like an old pair of beloved slippers. Michael, on the other hand, was like a new, irresistible pair I couldn't refuse. Michael was the first to bring up the possibility of a future together, which led to a candid discussion. We subtly mentioned to our spouses a story about an acquaintance who had lost access to shared finances due to delays in inheritance processing after their partner's death. We framed it as a reminder of the importance of including both partners on all accounts. For Alice, this was an opportunity to show Michael that she trusted him, unlike her family, who had always been wary of his intentions. In my case, William picked up on the hint, and we added each other's names to all our accounts. He even suggested adding both our names to the safe where we kept valuables, like jewelry, coins, and bonds. That night, I thanked him with an unusual passion, though my thoughts weren't on him. Only later, when Elizabeth re-entered our lives, did I begin to realize the extent of the changes between William and me. William and I were genuinely overjoyed to see her again. We easily drifted into laughter, reminiscing about stories from her childhood, as if no time had passed. At one quieter moment, she pulled me aside and told me that her father had recently shared with her his concerns about my gloomy mood, wondering if I was okay. Nevertheless, she noted that today I looked entirely like myself. I admitted that he was probably right, sharing that I felt down. Perhaps because of menopause, I suggested. I quickly assured her that my marriage was fine. Although it hurt to hide the truth from my daughter, I wasn't ready to reveal everything just yet. Later, when Michael and I were alone, I told him I suspected William was starting to sense that something was off with me. I proposed we accelerate our plan. What we were about to do was unfair to William and Alice, but we'd already crossed so many lines. Why stop now? The plan was to take as much money as we could and disappear together. Although we knew our departure would cause pain, we believed it wouldn't be a lifelong ruin for them. After all, both William and Alice were financially secure. William because of his career, and Alice thanks to her family inheritance. They'd manage. Michael had no ties to Alice's family, so he felt no guilt about taking the family money. As for me, I managed to justify the choice by convincing myself it was inevitable since I hadn't been able to change him. I pushed aside my guilt, focusing on the future with Michael, envisioning a life free of obligations, where we'd live solely for ourselves. Soon, the past would be left behind. The time was nearly here. I called to confirm the dinner reservation William had made for us at 7 o'clock. Indeed, the table was set, with a chilled bottle of our favorite wine. William told me he'd be late at work and would meet me at the restaurant. At 4:20 p.m., I went to the bank, handed the teller my ID, and requested to withdraw all funds from the accounts. But when she checked the information, I noticed a look of confusion on her face. After a moment, she explained, "It appears there's been a mistake. Your husband was here earlier today and withdrew nearly all the funds. When such a large amount is taken out, we usually ask if there are any concerns. Your husband explained that he was worried about a market crash and wanted to keep cash on hand for a while. We assured him it wasn't necessary, but he insisted." A spark of hope ignited in me. "What about the safe deposit box?" I asked, thinking maybe he'd left cash there. She directed me to the man in the brown jacket by the elevator who could help with that, and reminded me to bring my key. Clutching the key, I approached the man, signed the log, and noticed William's signature a few lines above mine. A wave of unease washed over me. Had he hidden our money here or taken it all? The outcome depended entirely on what I'd find. Following the man to the vault, I watched as he placed the safe deposit box on the table and left me alone to open it. My pulse quickened as I prepared myself for what I might find inside. My heart sank. Inside was only a single letter. It read, "Lila, if you're reading this, then you know I got to the money first. Michael will find out soon as well. When Alice and I discovered what you and Michael were plotting, we prepared our own response. Divorce was one option, but your plan worked out even better, vanishing with the money and leaving you both with nothing. You and Michael hid your affair well, but if you need someone to blame, look no further than that phone operator who called your secret mobile while it was on silent in the other room. When I stumbled upon that strange phone hidden in your purse, it seemed harmless at first. Just some telemarketer leaving a message, and I didn't think much of it. But then it struck me, why would you even need another phone? A few innocent explanations flashed through my mind, but a darker thought began to take shape. You're hiding an affair? This suspicion grew stronger, filling in the gaps left by the subtle changes in your behavior. I kept my worries to myself, though I was already noticing other signs pointing to betrayal. Do you remember the set of pens I bought? I needed those gel pens because I kept losing mine. I gave you a few, scattered them around the house so they'd always be close at hand. But they weren't just pens. Each of them had a tiny transmitter, recording conversations and sending them to my computer. I even slipped one into your purse. After a few days, the puzzle started coming together, and in the end, we had the full picture. We both suffered from broken hearts as we unraveled the truth. But amid this pain, something unexpected happened. We found a connection with each other. At first, we were bound by a desire for revenge, but soon it grew into something much deeper. Dreams of escaping with a new, thrilling partner weren't originally our idea. We borrowed it from you, and it felt fair because that's exactly what both of you wanted. I've already shared my side of the story with Elizabeth, and soon she'll be fully in the loop. I promised to cover the remainder of her education, and that promise will soon be kept. When our daughter understands everything, she'll likely reach out to you. I explained it all to her, about you, about Michael, so be prepared. Meanwhile, Alice and I will set off on our own adventures around the world and watch you from afar. I doubt you'll have the means to travel now, especially after your boss found out about your office affair. But if you don't manage to visit exotic places, don't worry. We'll send postcards from our trips. Oh, and we recently canceled your plane ticket. I doubt you'd want to leave the country without money or cards. I told her something I never told you, a nickname from grade school. They called me Bug after I performed in a school play. Thank you, I suppose, for 31 years of marriage and for our wonderful daughter. But now, knowing how you see me, as a husband, a lover, a partner, I can't pretend anymore. I can only hope that whatever you had with Michael was worth it. At least you'll have that. I regret spending so much time on you. You know, you're not worthy of me. Goodbye.
This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. 27 years ago, if anyone had told me that I would end up here, preparing for a divorce, I would have laughed in their face. She was everything to me, my partner, my confidant, my love. I thought she was perfect. Yes, she had a fiery temper, a spark of anger sometimes, but it only added to her charm, as did her jet-black hair. I truly believed we were meant for each other. Together, we would face all challenges, build our life, and stand side by side, no matter what. When I made my vows to love, honor, and be there in sickness and in health, it never crossed my mind that anything could destroy what we had. I certainly didn't think I'd end up here, wondering where it all went wrong. But there's an old saying that keeps ringing in my mind, something along the lines of how madness can't be cured. I don't remember who said it first, but those words keep replaying in my head as I try to find some explanation, though I find none. Just a few days ago, I was sitting in my attorney's office, James Bennett. He prefers to be called Jimmy, though I wasn't in the mood for such familiarity. Jimmy is the kind of guy you'd enjoy having a beer with, but that day, I was speaking with James, the attorney. I asked him, "James, do you have any idea why I'm in this mess?" He shrugged. "Honestly, Bob, not a clue. By this point, we usually have some specific accusations, maybe even hints of manipulation. Right now, all we know is that she's accusing you of cheating." "Cheating?" I laughed, shaking my head in disbelief. "James, it's absurd. I was faithful to Rebecca." He looked at me, completely serious. "Listen, Bob, I have to ask. If there's anything at all you need to tell me, do it now. I need to know everything to represent you properly." I leaned in closer, firmly saying, "James, I swear I did not cheat." "All right," he replied, though there was a trace of doubt in his tone. "I'll take your word for it. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding we can clear up." But a glint of skepticism lingered in his eyes. He went on, "You've seen the photos. You know what she did. Are you sure reconciliation is impossible? James, she crossed a line. She betrayed my trust, and there's no going back. I remained loyal, and whatever led her to this, it doesn't change my stance." I paused before adding, "Guide me through this divorce. Maybe someday I'll look back and feel differently, but certainly not now." He nodded with a faint, understanding smile. He'd been through similar situations before. At that moment, his secretary knocked, announcing the arrival of the others. "Thank you, Margaret. Show them in," James said. We moved to the large conference table where James greeted the opposing lawyer at the door. Following his advice, I remained silent. When Rebecca's lawyer extended his hand to me, I ignored it and took a seat, keeping my distance from the woman who would soon be my ex-wife. Rebecca's attorney wasted no time, seating her and beginning with a phrase that sounded deliberately polite. "It's unfortunate we're here, but as I'm sure James explained, it's best to maintain utmost professionalism to avoid unnecessary tension." The irony of his words was almost laughable. Now he wanted professionalism? I felt a surge of anger rising, but James shot me a look, reminding me to keep my composure. Taking a deep breath, I held back as he had advised. The lawyer continued, "I assume you've reviewed the divorce statement. My client believes her demands are more than fair given the circumstances." Was he trying to provoke me? Testing my patience? James quickly picked up on this and seized the opportunity to interject. "And what exactly are these circumstances, Henry?" Rebecca's lawyer merely hinted, tossing veiled accusations my way. "So, James," he sneered, "your client has had so many affairs he can't even remember who he was caught with this time, right?" His tone grated on me, testing my patience. I clenched my teeth, holding back a sharp retort that might have required someone to tie me down to keep me quiet. "My client denies any wrongdoing," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "If you don't have actual evidence, this conversation is a dead end." At least the lawyer feigned listening, a courtesy I could hardly ever draw from Rebecca during those few tense exchanges she allowed after our separation. "Well, James, maybe we'll start with a small gesture," he said, his voice laced with condescension. "My client couldn't bear to look at these herself. I'd appreciate if you'd handle their review with appropriate caution." With that, he handed me a sealed envelope. I took it, opened it, and began sifting through the photos inside. The photos told their own story. Casual shots of me with a woman my age, our closeness captured over dinner. We sat together deep in conversation, our faces turned toward one another. In some photos I held her hands. In one, her head rested on my shoulder. A particular shot showed me kissing the top of her head, our closeness undeniable. I distinctly remembered that day, knowing that our lunch had extended into an afternoon spent together at her hotel. Rebecca's lawyer spoke again, twisting the knife. "While we may not have photos of you both leaving her room, I doubt cards were all you were playing in there." I felt irritation rise under my skin, but kept myself in check, refusing to take his bait. "This isn't evidence of an affair, Henry," I snapped. "It simply shows we had lunch together." Despite my words, I continued examining the photos, my irritation growing with each glance. Leaning toward James, I whispered a suggestion. He looked at me surprised but nodded slightly, regaining his composure. James then turned to Rebecca. "Mrs. Jackson, have you seen these photos before?" Her expression shifted as she shook her head, her eyes glistening with tears. Her lawyer quickly interjected, "James, I already told you. She hasn't seen them." Without hesitation, James pressed on. "Mrs. Jackson, can you tell us how these photos came into your possession?" Her lawyer answered for her, explaining, "A friend witnessed your husband's interaction with this woman and felt compelled to document it." In that moment, I knew who had been behind the camera: Rebecca's close friend, Julia. Julia, whose own marriage had crumbled due to betrayal, seemed to have made it her mission to judge all men as guilty. She had happily meddled in our relationship, and Rebecca had trusted her word. James addressed Rebecca again, his tone firm. "Mrs. Jackson, you're familiar with your husband's family, aren't you?" "Yes, I know them well," she replied, a hint of anger in her voice. He continued, "Are you familiar with his parents, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, and cousins?" Rebecca nodded, the tension on her face becoming more apparent. "Then I regret to ask this question," he said, carefully sliding the photos closer to her, "but I believe it's necessary that you see them for yourself." Rebecca's lawyer sprang to his feet. "This is completely out of line, James. My client is already shattered by her husband's actions. Forcing her to relive this by looking at these photos is cruel." James remained resolute. "Apologies, Henry, but we either resolve this now or face each other in court." Rebecca's lawyer restrained his anger, then sighed, turning to her. "I'm sorry, Rebecca, but if they insist, we have little choice. It's time to bring this to an end." The lawyer played his role with precision, his work impeccable and deeply devoted to the case. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that he might have personal interests regarding Rebecca once all this was over. Rebecca was crying now, but strangely, I didn't feel emotionally connected to the situation. James leaned forward, laying each photo in front of her with meticulous care, arranging them methodically. Rebecca looked at her lawyer for support, then back at the photos. Her tears gradually faded, replaced by confusion. I don't understand. What is this?" she muttered. "These are photographs," James replied, his tone softened slightly but still formal. "These are the pieces of evidence you provided to confirm your husband's alleged affair." She slowly shook her head, trying to comprehend. "No, I still don't understand." James leaned closer, holding her gaze. "Mrs. Jackson, can you identify the woman in these photos?" Her face flushed, more from embarrassment than anger. That's Bob's cousin, Suzanne. Are you saying he's really involved with his own cousin?" James looked at me, signaling that it was my turn to speak. "She called me at work, asking to meet. She said she had learned about her husband's affair and was understandably devastated." I continued, explaining how I had tried to comfort Suzanne at a restaurant, though she was overwhelmed with emotion. To give her a chance to cry in private, I suggested we take some food to go and head to a nearby hotel room where she could let it out away from prying eyes. "I wasn't having an affair with my cousin," I clarified. The misunderstanding was obvious, though Rebecca's lawyer stubbornly clung to his argument. "Well," he muttered, "this does change things a bit, doesn't it?" He turned back to Rebecca, his confidence shaken. "Are you absolutely certain this is your husband's cousin?" He was clearly desperate, realizing the expected outcome was slipping away. Rebecca merely nodded, defeated. "It seems this was just a misunderstanding," he mumbled, starting to rise from his chair as if ready to leave. But James wasn't about to let the scene end so easily. "Not so fast, Henry." Ever loyal to my interests, James wasn't inclined to wrap up the matter just yet. He looked at me and I nodded at him. "Mrs. Jackson, there are a few more photos to review." He placed another image before her. "Do you recognize the people in this photo?" Rebecca's expression changed, her initial relief shifting to wariness. "Yes." "And who exactly is depicted in this photograph?" James pressed. Rebecca hesitated, then replied, "That's me, and that's my friend Julia." "And the two men with you?" James asked, maintaining his calm tone. She looked down at her hands. I don't remember." Are you saying, James continued, that you don't recognize men you see at work every day? Rebecca gave a slight shrug, as if hoping the problem would vanish if ignored, but it was impossible to ignore. In this picture, you're dancing with one of these men. Of course, it's just a dance, nothing inappropriate. Although, he added dryly, I recall being taught to leave room for the Holy Spirit. Rebecca grew visibly uncomfortable. Another photo appeared on the table. Here, you're kissing the same man, and it doesn't look like a friendly kiss. It's rather passionate. He moved another photo in front of her. And here, you're dancing again, with his hands placed on you. Let's just say, quite unambiguously. At this, Rebecca finally broke down, fresh tears streaming down her face. James, however, remained unfazed. Do you remember that night, Mrs. Jackson, when these photos were taken? Rebecca said nothing, her only response a growing sob. James continued without pause. After you left the club with Julia and her friend, do you remember where you went? Her sobbing grew louder as he placed the last piece of evidence on the table. My detective followed your party to Julia's house. Just a small piece of advice, Mrs. Jackson, he added coldly. If you plan to conduct yourself this way in the future, be sure the curtains are fully closed. With that, James laid out the final set of photos, showing intimate scenes captured through Julia's bedroom window. The evidence spoke for itself, and the case was closed. The accusations were utterly absurd. Not one of them would have stood up to even a superficial review, let alone a court examination. When Henry's expression shifted, realizing the direction we were heading, James replied calmly and confidently, No, we won't be filing a suit based on infidelity. This is about irreconcilable differences. His tone was steady, but every word carried weight. We wanted to ensure that your client fully understands our stance, he continued, sliding a stack of documents across the table and leaning back, allowing the gravity of the situation to sink in. The truth is, when I was suddenly thrown out of my own home, I was utterly unprepared, caught completely off guard. It took weeks to gather myself, and when I finally did, doubts began to gnaw at me. Rebecca had always been devoted, but Julia's influence slowly seeped into her, pushing her toward revenge with another man. I tolerated Rebecca's impulsive nature and her fiery temper, but this was something else entirely. She found another man almost immediately. Forgiving her would mean living with that betrayal, and I couldn't bear that burden. That evening, I returned home too exhausted to talk about Susan. To me, Susan was like a sister, nothing more. I intended to clarify this with Rebecca the next day, but Julia interfered first, and everything went to hell. Julia showed Rebecca a single, deceptive photo taken from behind. It was undoubtedly me in the picture, but Susan's face was obscured. By the time I returned home, Rebecca was like a hurricane of accusations and fury. She hurled words and objects without stopping. I tried to explain, tried to calm her down, but then the police arrived and ordered me to leave my own home. The police. That's how it all began. Nearly 6 months have passed since that night. Today, I signed the final papers, ending a divorce process that has left me utterly drained. No one comes out a winner in cases like this. Only a person without empathy would think there are winners when dreams are shattered and a shared life is destroyed. Now, here I am, back at the bar I used to frequent before marriage, one of the few places that still feels familiar. I'm sipping a cheap beer when suddenly I hear a familiar voice. Would you buy a lady a drink? She says nothing more. I already know who it is, even without turning around. Tough day? She asks. I nod. The worst, I reply. I sigh. I ruined everything, lost all that mattered to me, the only thing that ever did. She softens her gaze and there's sympathy in her eyes. So it was a serious mistake, she says quietly. I look down at my drink, avoiding my reflection in the glass. Yes, I failed to see who I should have trusted and believed someone I never should have. She shakes her head with a slight, bitter smile. Sounds pretty foolish. I signal to the bartender. A glass of wine for her. Maybe this is a chance to start anew, or maybe it's just the closing of another chapter. Only time will tell, and whatever lies ahead, I'll have to face it. Rebecca trusted her unreliable friend and destroyed our 27-year marriage, mistakenly believing I had betrayed her and rushing into the arms of the first man she met. After such a betrayal, Rebecca wanted to leave the marriage with half of everything we had, but she walked away with nothing. She left with just a small bag containing her personal belongings. It's a pity I spent 28 years on a woman who, when we were young, refused to have children with me and later betrayed me. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.